WWE 24, I just got finished watching the latest episode, Women's Evolution, which chronicles the rise, decline, and resurgence of the women's division in WWE. We go into how women were used to be, well, show their athleticism and wrestling skills back in the old days, and then we get the resurgence, then we get a little bit of a rise a bit with China and Trish Stratus and Lita, they're the three respective females of their era, and then he went into this decline period when after they retired and when China left due to different circumstances. Let's just go with that. Um, the women's division got really well sidetracked. Let's just go with that. And when the PG era happened, the women's division to WWE management was just essentially useless because in the PG era, they couldn't do the sexualized acts, they couldn't do the sex appeal, they couldn't do any of this, they couldn't do any of that. So they had to resort to backstage skits and 2-minute matches at best because WWE management didn't like the women's division for some reason. And then they started chronicling the NXT women's division, which showed Triple H's philosophy of booking and how, well, Triple H is clearly going to be a great leader when he takes over the WWE. He just needs to deal with the politics and egos backstage, John Cena and whatnot. So how Natalia and Charlotte were given basically unlimited time to do their match at one of the NXT takeovers for the women's title, which actually makes sense since they're on the WWE network and they could go as long as they want since, well, they don't have to deal with channel providers, they don't have to deal with TV contracts, they don't have to deal with time constraints, they could go as long as they want, like they acknowledged on the NXT TakeOver Brooklyn episode when Corey Graves, I believe, says, well, since we're on our own network, we could do whatever we want. We could go as long as we want. Because it went over 11 and, well, that was awesome. But moving on. So it goes into detail a bit regarding the women's division, and then it started getting Bella worshipping, like the Bellas were responsible for all this, even though, well, a lot of people didn't like them, and people didn't want to see the Bellas wins. And everyone concluded to themselves that, well, they're only here because of their lovers. Because John Cena and Daniel Bryan are such high powers in WWE, that means the Bella Twins are going to get favoritism. Because, well, if they're dating John Cena and Daniel Bryan, then, well, we have to give them what they want, or else John Cena might leave the company in protest. Like they did like Jerry Lawler did when his wife got fired. Um, yeah, nowadays people tend to forget that, I think. Moving on. Then start talking about Stephanie McMahon and talking about how she's an inspiration, how she is the most popular since she gets the most screen time, even though she's not a wrestler. Like I'm over sure they would go into a little bit envious regarding the women's division, getting a little envious that she doesn't wrestle that much, and yet she's given the most screen time on TV, like a total of 20 minutes if you count all those boring long-winded promos, like only a few times they're exciting. Like the whole entitlement speech she made against Shane McMahon and the WWE fans, which is way ahead of its time. If this was 1999, if she had said this in 1999, you could say, "Wow, she predicted the future regarding how everyone how the people have become a little bit entitled nowadays." But moving on. Along with that, I was sure they would also go into detail about Sarah, the coach in NXT. They would talk about how WWE coaches were initially going to just say, "Oh, do these cat fights and whatnot. Do this, do that, do that." And then Sarah said, "No, we're going to do it the wrestling way." And then we also show Lita and Trish's main event on Raw. And They didn't talk about AJ Lee. I could get why, because they're kind of bitter towards her. I mean, like, I don't accept it because they're bitter towards her, but I understood why they wouldn't talk about her. Like, they showed a clip of her at the end. That's just she was a highlight, but she wasn't in it. And also, just to go out of place here, when they were showing the match listing for the December 6th episode of Raw in 2004, I think that was the episode. Um, they showed Chris Benoit's name, and I'm like, okay, they're gonna edit that out. Like, okay, wow, they really went there. Like, they really just indirectly acknowledged Chris Benoit. Wow. But moving on, we show how Lita and Trish were one of the big mainstays of the women's division, and then when they retired in 2006, the women's division went two steps back. And then I always had spoke that there would be a successor to Trish and Lita, and I thought it would be AJ Lee and Paige. That didn't work out because, well, WWE didn't care. And then we got Sasha Banks and Bayley, who put women's wrestling back on the map. Though that was in NXT, I was afraid when they got called up to the main roster eventually because they wouldn't be given the proper respect. But I'm glad that they now are getting the proper respect. Like, except for Bayley, she's still in NXT at the time of this video and the time of all this. But I was glad that they would be giving this women division more time, more character development, and then they like talk about the triple threat match at WrestleMania that many people say stole the show, but they didn't really go into depth about it. Like, they showed this big presentation of the new women's title and how they were referred to as superstars along with the men. And I get why, and like everyone could get why WWE went with the whole design of the women's title, because they want to be seen as just as big as the male superstars. So yeah, we're gonna make it look just like the WWE Championship to symbolize, yeah, we're good, we're just as good as the men. So I get that, even though I kind of have mixed feelings about the design. Like, I thought for sure it'd be a little bit more unique when I first saw it, but I got why they did it, and I understood it and accepted it. But ultimately, while this isn't the best episode of WWE 24, in my honest opinion, it certainly was deserving to talk about the women's evolution and how it's progressed in recent months since last year, since the Divas Revolution started to the women's evolution, and I really can't wait what's gonna happen. But but I'm also hearing that, but they are also optimistic that they could get, well, a women's main event on pay per view, which is hard to do since you need to deal with the men getting mad, specifically guys like who have high power in WWE trying to like put them down, and then you have Vince McMahon, who's a senile old man. So the only chance I see them ever getting a women's main event on pay per view, or and it'd be impossible to say WrestleMania, but the only way I see that happening is possibly under Triple H's regime. But we'll never know. Maybe it could happen, maybe it won't. All we can do now is hope. Well, everyone, this was Neo Reality Entertainment. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and donate. Stay tuned for more.